All right, so I want to start taking advantage of this little Windows section, this little update video to post new videos every couple of weeks based on what's going on the channel. So I have a couple updates I'm going to give right now. One is RTS 22 is done with. Well, there will be more stuff going into RTS 23, which I'll also introduce here or discuss here. There's going to be topics surrounding 3D navigation AI. And then also Unity ECS, which is out now into production. And then finally, I will be using this particular video to make reminder callouts about Patreon and Discord. I could really use the support on this stuff. I love making this stuff, but it is definitely work to do. All right, so let's start at the beginning. RTS 22 final dev video is in the RTS 22 playlist. You can go check that out. Topics on it include dynamic music. There's some really awesome dynamic content. Cole Harmon, one of the people that I worked with in Redmond, Washington, they helped produce some of this, and they're a great artist, and you'll be able to see what they have. You can actually go buy the asset pack that includes this. It's all available for anyone. Okay, so the dynamic music is covered in there and how that works and the sound effects and the code that's controlling the dynamics of it. Then there's artificial intelligence improvements on the Unity NavMesh AI. I promised earlier I was going to get into that, and I wanted to make sure I covered it. Now, ideally, I am certainly expecting these systems and more complicated versions of these systems to be making it into the RTS 23. But I had the code base there in the test project, so I'm showcasing the test project. There's also camera controls, mini-map, the menu, and the menu is not really that big of a deal usually, but the reason the menu is designed in the way that it is because it ties directly into the tech tree architecture. The tech tree architecture is done. I have been satisfied with the tech tree architecture that I've used for quite a few years now. Usually I end up shifting around to different styles, different patterns to replace a lot of different things, but especially the tech tree that usually you want a lot of flexibility and power with, I'm happy with it. So I showcase how that one works. And then finally, a mineral explosion, because quite frankly, this mineral explosion, I designed it purposefully to look like this, and it matched almost everything I had intended. I love the look of it. So that is a section in here where I made sure to include how that works. Now, this is the higher cost version of it. I did also have a lower cost version. I was starting to work with it, but quite frankly, I can't find the test code for it. But it's not too big of a deal. I'm not planning on using this one in RTS 23. So a lot of these features are not going into RTS 23. The camera controls will be completely different. The AI will be there. That should be pretty much the same. The mini-map is going to be entirely different. The menu tech tree will be the same. Mineral explosion will not. Dynamic music will be, but it's going to likely need a new style or a new feel for the music to go with it. That feel has not been 100% identified yet, but it might still work with the exact same audio that's already been created by Cole Harmon. Okay, now why is RTS 22 done? Why are we finished with it? And to be quite honest, when I had first started producing it, there were a few issues. One is that Unity's ECS package, which is really good for managing large-scale projects with a lot of duplicate content, great for RTSs, for instance, it was not in production yet. So I was not going to trust it. It was not going to be something I was going to pass on to everyone else, because even just trying to follow along with that code base when it was out earlier, like 5 years ago, it was changing every week, every couple of days sometimes, and tutorials would be out of sync, and so there would be almost no way for my own code to be able to work. But now that they had for my own tutorials to be able to work beyond a week, why? I'm not going to go through that effort for 1 week's worth of results that people just can't use long term. So I ended up, I've held off on it for now, and now I'm using it. I'm going to be using it. So anyway, when I first got into this, one other key factor is that I didn't have it 100% designed. I had the core level play designed and a lot of the key features of that. But it was basic. It was kind of more of a basic structure, and I was going more after cheaply identifying rich visuals. and still making sure that the mechanics were fun to play. But it was still following a pretty close clone pattern to RTS 21, StarCraft, for instance. The next version of this is very different. And the GDD is pretty much done. It's like 95% of the way complete. There's a few details to work in, but ultimately I've got the art style, I've got the play style, I've got a lot of the core concepts and mechanics of how it's going to work, and it's really getting into the weeds now of identifying and solidifying. Okay, so I want to give a call out thanks to Tim, Randy, and William in particular. There have been some other people who've been helping me along the way, but these guys are some of my advisors and friends that help me out with various questions that I've been posting online into groups, looking for ways to take this next architecture, not just the architecture, but the play style in the RTS game, and really bring that out. So this one, let me give you a couple examples of what's going on in the new one. So if I go to here and then inside of this, one thing is that it's going to be an RTS played across the surface of a gigantic battleship, space battleship. It's going to be relatively low poly for the ship because I want a lot more flat surfaces on it. That doesn't mean that low poly has to be the effect or the style that we're going with, but we also want to keep the expenses light on it because I'm planning on having potentially thousands of ships in play at any given moment of time. So that's another part of what these tests are doing, identifying when and where these different types of vehicles and things can all start fitting in. Anyway, our performance. Okay, so here's some of the issues that we're running into. First of all, I want to bring up 3D Nav Mesh. So I'm using Unity Experimental AI, Nav Mesh AI, and that allows me to get a 3D Nav Mesh. This is awesome. That is really cool. I'm seeing all the sides of this ship, like literally all the sides of this ship are part of the navigation mesh. However, they're disconnected and the Nav Mesh AI is pretty much a black box. I can get out the list of total triangles that are in it, but I'm running into a very serious issue with it when I'm trying to identify where these gaps are, because you can see this gap right here. That doesn't get connected. That is not connected, which means I have to manually go through and start adding all these nav mesh links to it that span across. Now, it does have one where I can span it across an entire area, but I want this to be dynamic. For the first release of this product, I'm planning on having one ship that was heavily designed, like one map that was heavily designed and purposefully driven, and then a dynamic generator to go on top of it to build new ships with new structures, with new battle plans, and new strategies that you have to form, and all of that being dynamic. So if I want any of the dynamics to work, if I want to have repeatable, playable content that changes when you come back to it so you can have more enjoyable experiences over time, this has to work. I need the dynamics in there. I'm a lone developer on this right now, and so I don't have the time and energy to make a large scale amount of this content. All right, I need to identify where this is, but as I said, it's kind of a black box. For instance, I cannot isolate out the nav mesh or the triangles for any single side of this on its own. I guess there actually are things I could do, but because of the fact they're still disconnected from the surface next to it, it still brings up challenges. Okay, so let's start talking about what some of those or how I'm dealing with it. I have to write my own code to start dealing with this. So I'm actually identifying, for one, I've got a breakdown of all the triangles, and I'm overlaying that with just gizmo lines to start showcasing it. And so the first pass was just to get the triangles and make sure they show up in the right spots. The second one was organizing them by normals to identify which part of the surface of the nav mesh surface it related to. So I get the normal of the nav mesh surface and find anything within under 90 degrees of that. And then let's see, or within under 45 degrees, because each one is 45 degrees from each other. Then a next one, which I take, so I've got that identified to say all this top area goes to Nav Mesh, I don't know, the top one, I guess, or probably Nav Mesh 1. That probably was the default for the matching the same flat pattern as gravity. Okay, then this next one where I basically define the seams going in between the different segments. So the fact that there is a nav mesh that covers the surface will be split from these sides. And so we see a border line that identifies that because I need to be placing my nav mesh links here. However, there's also some weak points here where we can see that there's an extra line being added here and here and here. In fact, if I go over to 2, these are blue lines. That one I can't even see, but if I get the right angle, it's showing up blue. And that is because for some reason the nav mesh or the model mesh seems to think that those ones have a normal that's facing this way, this direction on it, which doesn't really make much sense for those lines to have that. But it became incredibly obvious when I went back to Blender where I was designing the base ship, and I could see that those particular lines or faces, they have additional vertices on them. And so they're hiding extra triangles that make it really tough for the system to figure out. 2 of the vertices would basically be overlapping. And how do you get the math on that? You'll just kind of get whatever angle you get. Okay. And also because of all these additional extra vertice points, we end up seeing some things inside of here. Like, let me go to, to this. Where it was trying to identify the surfaces, and it's got some messed up stuff here where the nav mesh does not go above the surface here. It kind of dips below, and that doesn't make any sense. But that again is because of complications in the nav mesh, or in the model mesh. So I'm actually I think I'm going to go the code route and identify poorly defined triangles, but this one I'll probably have to do some manipulations and clean up to the actual code. So this sample code is also identifiers of test code I can use later on to identify weak spots in the models that I'm passing into this. Anyway, so this is going to be large scale, lots of speed differences, lots of intelligence in battle. There's going to be a heavy emphasis on intel gathering and also deceit being major factors of the gameplay. So those are all different things that I'm going to be tying into. And if you want to get more involved in these discussions and find out and help shape this game, please sign up for Patreon or even just get involved in the discussions on YouTube. But if you sign up for Patreon, you can also join in the Discord and be part of these conversations where we're discussing this stuff and what the future of this and how it's being shaped and molded. And you can join the teams and all the people that I'm working with to try to make this a really, really awesome video game. All right, thanks. Talk to you later.